Welcome to Solutions with Courtney Anderson. I'm Courtney Anderson. This is episode 238 of this show, and today we have a program that's part of the Management Magicians series. Our Management Magicians series is, of course, a series dedicated to in honor of those proud and brave individuals who step forward to lead and manage organizations. And so, as we honor our elite, high performing, exceptionally skilled, and adept managers, we understand that when we watch them from afar, it appears as if what they're doing is magical. Team members come to work early and on time with fantastic attitudes, cooperation, communication skills. When mistakes are made, and they are made often, because that's human nature, the team members acknowledge the issue. They immediately take action to rectify and or apologize for the action and to ensure that it does not happen again if possible. There's a candor in the management's workplace, an honesty, a trust, a respect. It literally looks magical. People get along. They're getting really amazing stuff done. Often you have innovation, both small and large, that makes it more efficient, better, that serves customers and constituencies at a level that competitors can't even come close to approaching, right? How does this happen? It literally looks like it's magic. They've cast a spell. They've hypnotized people. No, it's just that they've combined a skill set of understanding what management is about, the psychology of it, the sociology of it, the economics of people, and they apply this broad knowledge base with techniques that are highly effective, so that they hire people who want to be there. They retain those people. People basically feel, it's a good job, and they're engaged, and the ship sort of runs itself at a certain point. There you go. And of course, if highly skilled and experienced team members stay at the organization for long periods of time, while you bring in appropriate new talent, new ideas, then it's going to be, again, that sort of well-oiled machine that's just running and humming and awesome and exceeding expectations, and it's a win-win, right? So that's what the series is about. We are pulling back the curtain, shall we say, and we're exposing the secrets of those management magicians, so that people who are either aspiring management magicians or former management magicians or even current management magicians that just want to share in a little bit of refresher knowledge can explore and understand how they do that, how it happens. So in the Management Magician series, here in episode 238, the specific show today is one that I'm eager to dive into for multiple reasons. So let's explore. What's the topic? The topic for our show is "That's Not Part of My Job." That's not part of my job. That's not part of my job. That is not part of my job. That is our topic. And one of the reasons I said I'm eager to explore this is because it's something that I have been discussing and addressing in corporate education and programs and training programs for about 15 years. This is one of the most popular things to discuss at work, from two perspectives. And let's be very candid up front that there's basically two perspectives on this. One perspective is from a leadership position or a peer, and they're the recipient of this. So they're at work, they're doing work activities, work related activities, and they reach out to a team member, whether it's a subordinate or a peer, or even a supervisor, and ask the team member who's part of the same work organization with shared mission and values and goals to contribute to a work task. And then they receive in response this topic. The response they receive is, "That's not part of my job. That is not part of my job. That's not my job. That's not my job." Okay. The other part of this topic is when someone is the sender of the message. So the first part is the recipient, who is talking about a work-related task and asking a actual work team member, so peer, subordinate, supervisor, to assist with their shared value, mission, and goals to service customers, constituents, and clients. And then they receive, that's not part of my job. Okay. The other side, though, was the sender. And this is a very different situation. We're talking about in this situation where the sender is doing their work-related tasks, and they are asked to do something that is not at all in any way related to the actual work, the organization, the mission, the value, the customers, the clients, and constituents. And so typically that's the stereotype we have, where often it's a supervisor, but it can be a peer and it can also be a subordinate. Again, these things are not title dependent. They're just dependent on who's asserting power in what situation. And so somebody's doing their job, and their coworker or their subordinate or their boss asks them to help them work on their grandchild's school project. Okay. The work that they're doing is not at all related to the grandchild's school project. The grandchild is not a constituent, customer, or client of the organization. This is literally a personal issue that has nothing to do with the job. And that's a situation where the person is the sender, right? They're not the recipient, but they're the one saying that is not part of my job, right? Your grandkid's school thing is not at all related to what we're doing here with our business activity. So no. Okay. So let's work through both of these, because there's frustration, resentment, bitterness. People actually quit jobs. People are fired from jobs because of this. Just one little simple topic, right? That's not part of my job. Now, from a management position perspective, the high level, very effective person who's a manager who also is enjoying being a manager, right? So not just that they're effective at it, but they're content and or happy at times doing it. Like they like it, right? They get up and feel like, yeah, I'm gonna go manage. It's gonna be a good day at work. Yeah, right? Their version of that. So this situation where we've got the sender and we've got the recipient, and neither of them are doing anything to further our goal of having a high performing organization, we can just right now at the outset imagine, wow, there's a lot of bad consequences of this. Well, yeah, that's why I said for about the last 15 years or so, as of the time of taping this show, this is why this topic comes up all the time. So let's start with the first part. The first part that we talked about related to the person who's the recipient. So we were talking about a scenario, the context is such that I'm doing my work, and I'm talking to somebody who's also a work team member. So I'm not going and asking somebody who doesn't work here, right? I'm not going and asking, my grandchild or my next door neighbor who doesn't work at the organization. I'm literally asking someone who works the same organization I'm working at. So that way we have a shared organization and shared mission, values, customers, clients, and constituents to serve. All right, so I'm working, they're working, and we work at the same organization. That's really important. It sounds silly, but actually it isn't. It's interesting because when you hear these situations in real life and you're trying to troubleshoot and work backwards to come up with solutions, oftentimes it's not even that somebody's talking about a team member. They're talking about somebody that they asked for help with work, and that person doesn't even work at the same place. And then they get mad. And they're like, I can't believe I asked him to help me. And then it's like, oh, okay. Well, who exactly did you ask? Well, I asked my next door neighbor. Oh, okay. Well, so how long has your next door neighbor worked at the same place you do? Oh, no, my next door neighbor doesn't work there at all. Okay, well then why are you asking somebody who doesn't work at that place to help you do your job? Okay, so the reason I say these things that may seem at times sort of, quote, obvious is because in real life they aren't. And it's not at all something that I'm sure most of you are surprised to understand, because you've experienced it, right? The more you start asking really specific details, walk me back through what happened, right? It becomes pretty evident that part of the huge challenge is you're asking somebody to contribute to something that they're not formally part of. So then it's logical for them to say, it's not part of my job. I'm your neighbor. I don't even work there. Okay, now it makes sense. So we were excluding those situations, and we were narrowing down the context to, I'm in my work organization, they're at their work organization. It's the same organization. And now I'm asking them to do something that's part of the job that we both have. All of those predicates are really important. All right. So, as I said, I've been using this content in programs for quite a while. One of the things that I used to talk about as a teaching example, and I don't have the article in front of me right now, so I'm doing this from memory, but this is something I've been using this for a long time. So over a decade ago, there was an article that was talking about efficiency in the airline industry. The airline industry, as I'm sure you're fully aware of, no matter where you live on the planet, is a tough industry. You can just think of the infrastructure costs in the airline industry. I mean, what do planes cost, right? And not just planes, but the infrastructure cost of, you know, airport slots, right? To be able to be slotted into the airport, and then the staffing. I got to get people that work on the planes, that maintain the planes, that are working with the customers in terms of ticketing and baggage, and the people that are flying the plane, and people that are flight attendants on the plane. I mean, there's a lot, right? And just the costs. I mean, this is a very high cost industry. Okay. All right. So there's the article I used to use, and it's still a great article, and I will dig it out, my files. It was an article talking about Southwest Airlines. Southwest Airlines was originally several decades ago a startup industry, and so it's about 40 years old, Southwest Airlines, and it started as a small organization, regional, to compete on a very low cost ticket price, and so originally started in the Southwest, and in fact Texas. And so the article that was really interesting is that as time has gone by, Southwest has become a very large airline in terms of the number of passengers carried, revenue, and also in many instances a profitable airline in a sector where many other competitors aren't. So all that's to say, this example I was reading from was talking about the culture. And so this Southwest Airlines, if you have never heard of them or read about them, I suggest you do, because often the articles you're going to read are talking about the things that they do differently. How do they make money in such a tough industry? And a lot of it has to do with the decisions that they make. So it's not magic, right? It's management. It just looks like magic. One of the things I talked about was their hiring process, right? And so the core issue was that their leaders that were interviewed in many articles basically make the statement, look, I can train somebody to do a certain skill, but I can't necessarily, I don't know how to, at least, train for attitude. So I hire for attitude, and then I can train for skills. But I don't go out and hire great skills and then think I can go fix the attitude. And I'm sort of paraphrasing. But that idea is one that, of course, is central to businesses and organizations around the world, right? That's, which is it? Do I go get the most talented, baggage claim handler? Or do I go out and get somebody that's not as skilled or experienced, but they got a great attitude, right? Like they really want to do it. What do you do? So Southwest is historically focused on, we're going to hire for attitude. Do people want to do this? Whether it's baggage claim or executive or pilot or anything. Like, do you want to do this? Attitude, right? And of course, they're sort of known for this in the industry. So if you've not flown, because they're historically, now recently they're starting to fly to destinations beyond just the States, the domestic flights are just starting to do this as the time of this show being recorded. But if you haven't flown them, they're known for sort of this sort of fun airline, that the people that work there, kind of are fun, and they smile and they tell stories. And sometimes I've been on their flights where literally the flight attendants will sing songs. Or make jokes while they're doing the announcements about the snacks or whatever. Just really fun, right? Like fun. Okay. So there was a story. There's an anecdote that I used to teach all the time that gave a story, and it was an example of how there was a horrible winter storm, right? And so obviously everybody in that airport is dealing with that same winter storm, right? But it was this great example that talked about how a pilot, right? A pilot whose job, we can generically think is to, pilot the plane, got out of the pilot area of the vehicle, of the air vehicle, and literally went down and started helping, shovel snow. And you would think like, well, that's stupid, maybe. Some people think and have said when I've discussed this and would have the article and read it in detail, they say, well, that's really stupid. You're a pilot. But the reason they were doing this wasn't because they loved snow and they wanted to waste time and they were, kind of slacking off, like, forget piloting. I'm just going to go out and shovel snow and have fun with snow. No, they were pitching in to help move the snow away from the areas that were sort of blocking the ability for the plane to be able to load and push back. They were helping clear the area so that that's what the other people did. That was their job primary. And the idea is thinking that the pilot can't fly the plane right now because due to the amount of snow. And so assuming, they finished their tasks, thought I have the ability to help, like literally with my hands, and went and started helping the other people who were clearing the path. And by doing so, we can surmise, was making a contribution that helped the plane be able to potentially be loaded and be able to leave faster, right? He helped. Now, you can think, well, that's not part of my job. The pilot certainly could say that's not part of my job. Or the pilot could realize, hey, we all are serving the same customers and passengers, and I can help, so I'm going to help. It's also an airline that historically had one where they didn't have dedicated crew that would come on and sort of clean the planes in between when the plane would land. Customers would exit, and then they'd wait for new customers to get on. That many of the flight attendants would go through and pick up trash and sort of put the seatbelts in the right area and help clean the cabin and get ready for the next set of passengers. And instead of saying, well, that's not part of my job, right? They pitch in. Now, you could argue that they were told, before they were hired, like, you're going to be pitching in, because other airlines have a different model where the flight attendants don't do that at all. The flight attendants, it's not part of their job, and other people are hired that come in that specifically are trained in the areas of helping with cabin readiness and cleanliness. But my point is that the attitude is one, and those were examples that I've taught for a really long time, showing you that, like, this is what I'm talking about. Like, you get up and you pitch in. So maybe you're pitching in on a job and that you feel is a lower skill set than you have, or one that's not directly related to your job, but it's in furtherance of the goal of the organization that we all share. So when somebody says it's not part of my job and they are working at the same organization and the request was work related, right? Then the message it sends the person who hears it is that they're not really, and I don't love. Let me be more accurate. I don't love the term team player because I think it's overused, and I think sometimes people rely on it sort of as a catch-all for everything. Often things that aren't actually related to the job. But the idea that, hey, we all are on the same team, right? We work here at the same place. We have the same customers, clients, or constituents. And so come on. We got to get people on the plane, or for a hospital or medical facility, we have to treat our patients, or, if we're an educational institution, hey, we've got to serve our students and create a good environment for our staff. And come on, like, we have the same goal, big picture. That's why we work at the same place. So if somebody tells me when we're doing our work that that's not part of their job, when it is part of the job, it's related to the big job of serving customer, clients, and constituents. So if I'm talking about let's do something to do the job, and I hear that's not part of my job, what that tells me is you have a very different version of what you believe is your job than what I think. And not me individually as Courtney, but the person who is engaged in the job. All the buzzwords we talk about in business all the time, right? Engagement, passion, creativity, all this kind of stuff. The person who really does cares about the big picture. And they understand that if they're going to pitch in and do things that aren't necessarily their best skill or their most prominent skill, that they're still serving the same goal. So they care. If I work at a place and I care about it, then it matters to me whether or not that we're meeting the big picture goals. And I'm going to do everything I can to help because I care. Whether or not people get on our plane, or patients are served at our medical facility, or students, have a high quality education in our school. I mean, I care about that. So whatever this thing is that somebody's asking me, even if that's not my skill set or I don't really know how to do it, tell me, and I'll pitch in and I'll do everything I can to give an extra bit of labor so we can try to, row in the same direction. If somebody says to me it's not part of my job, but it really is, we do care. You should care. You should care. I care. You care. But if somebody says it's not part of my job and it really is part of our shared organization, big picture goals, then it tells me that they don't have the same level of engagement as I do, which could be fine, but most of the time it's not. Most of the time when we receive that feedback, and we're usually asking for help because it's an urgent need. So it's usually not like a relaxed situation like, can you pitch in? But it's usually like, oh my goodness, we've got more patients than we normally do, or we've got this big rush, we got all these customers, can you help? And then if somebody says, not really, I don't do that, I only do this. Wow. And I've even mentioned in programs anecdotal experience from when I worked different types of jobs earlier in my life. So now I do a lot of uh, more intellectual jobs like writing and research and thinking and speaking and things of that nature, less physical labor. Partially because I'm not the most talented person. I'm not very coordinated, physical labor. But when I was younger, I did a lot more physical work because those were the jobs that would hire somebody with no experience and no education. I worked in food service, and I remember when I worked in restaurants, and I was a delivery driver. Usually that was my usual job at a restaurant because I liked that job and I was better at that than I was waitressing. I did waitress, and I was hired different times as a waitress, but I was actually a better skilled delivery driver than waitress, partially because it's hard. Waitressing is a very special skill set. You gotta have a really good memory, not just for the orders, for your customers' faces, and it's a certain type of skill set that I can do, and I did okay, but I wasn't as good as a waitress as I was as a delivery driver because that was a different set of skills. Yet, I remember when I worked in restaurants where I was a delivery driver, and if we didn't have a lot of deliveries to make, then the manager or a coworker would say, "Hey, can you go over here and take orders? Can you answer the phone and take orders for, people ordering pizza or chicken wings or whatever?" And sometimes they'd say, "Hey, it's not your number one thing, but we're really busy right now. We don't have an order for you, but can you, jump over here and help us make these pizzas or make the chicken wings or whatever?" Yeah. Sometimes they'd say, "We need the floors mopped." Or sometimes I'd be scheduled to be the one that stayed at the end of the shift and mopped the restaurant and cleaned the restrooms. And, you know, I can't, I mean, I'm sure I could have said at some point, that's not part of my job, but that technically it is. I know I'm a driver, but I also was trained. I know, they taught me how to take an order, from a customer. They taught me how to do the basics of what they needed me to do when it came to, making some of the food. I mean, come on. So whether it's an entry job, that's an entry level job, it was a minimum wage job, or it's a more skilled job, the point is like pitch in. Because the basic bottom line in my mind, which I've always understood, is this: if the organization has no customer or constituency, client, anything, then we all are out of a job. So if I, in theory, worked in food service and said, I don't want to do that. Like all I do is answer the phone and take orders. I don't make food, and I certainly don't deliver, right? Um, if I was so stubborn and did that, and then we really ran out of business because our customers were so upset and said, that place is horrible. They're slow, or they made the wrong food, or they delivered the wrong food. If you do that long enough, you'll stop having any customers. When you stop having customers, you're out of business, and then nobody has a job. So you hurt yourself. It's short-sighted. Even if you're a selfish person, I would think, and I make the argument when we do training programs and education programs about this. Come on, look. Even if you're only at a job for literally just your check, all you want is your paycheck. You don't care about the organization. You don't care about your client. You don't care about anything other than you and your money. Well, then you know what? Just for your own love of your own money, then don't be so short-sighted. So by saying to people when they ask for you to pitch in for a work-related issue during work hours at a work-related location, then pitch in. Because you know what? It helps you in your check. And it also will help you in a very strategic way, right? In a selfish way. People will perceive you. Oh, you're somebody that pitches in. Now, whether or not you really care, or you're only doing this because you think that it'll make you look good and it might make you be more eligible for a promotion or pay raise, then whatever. They don't need to know the deep underlying motive. All they're going to see is you pitched in with a good attitude. And a good attitude is simply doing stuff like, oh, okay, show me what you need me to do. See, that's it. That's easy. When you look on our show notes, and of course, we have CourtneyAnderson.com. That's our central website. That's our repository. It's our library. It's our resource. And I hope you bookmark at us and come back over time. We're constantly adding new content. And as you move through and I'm not at all exaggerating, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pages, soon to be over 1,000 pages of content. And there are programs like this. We have our companion video show. We've got blog articles. We've got webinars. We've got videos of speeches. We have all, and we're adding new content constantly. So it's exciting, and it's meant to be an expansive, comprehensive, again, resource repository for you to come back. But when you go there, you'll find microsites for all of the different shows and different programs, right? So when you go to the episode 238, that's what this is, and you go to our show site for just this, which is CourtneyAnderson.com / the rest of the URL for this microsite, which that long site is embedded in the actual file where you found this program, whether it's on iTunes or anywhere else. So it should be literally within the notes on the file. When you go to the show page, you'll see I have a couple of notes. Not always, but I often, and recently for shows, I've been doing the 14 sort of highlights of each program on the show notes. Since there are 14 of these in one sort of item, I call them a stone of solutions, right? Because a stone is 14 pounds. All right, so you'll see I have some articles that I've linked to. One of them is focusing on the situation of being the recipient of somebody saying that's not part of my job when it really is. Like, you're at work and they're at work. It's during work time. You guys work for the same organization. You're asking them to help with work, and all they need to do is just say, oh, either okay or how do I help, or just sit there, nod, or just start helping, right? Just not arguing with you and saying, well, that's not part of my job. That's not my job. All right, so the first article says, why that's not part of my job should be banished from your vocabulary. And I do want to clarify this. The way these shows work most of the time is I am constantly coming up with, and I have a running master list of show topic ideas that come from you, that come from events that I've experienced, or something that I've taught in the past, or something that I've that's come to mind. And then usually I'll build the programs, and then toward the end of deciding if the show is going to be scheduled, I'll go out and look and see if there are really any new resources to build the program around. So in other words, I found this source after the show was already scheduled and was on the lineup, right? So it makes me happy every time I do this. We have a show, and then we go out and look at research, and we find exactly that topic has been talked about somewhere else. It makes me think that this is beyond just what you, community members, have shared, and beyond my own professional and personal experience, but this is something that really is important. All right, so the article that I'm reading from is from H Careers, and it says, why? That's not part of my job should be banished from your vocabulary. Here's the quote. Supervisors, bosses, even coworkers appreciate team players. If you immediately deny assistance to someone who asks for your help, you come off as unkind, selfish, and possibly even lazy. A supervisor may interpret your response to mean that you care more about your own workload than the overall success of the company. This will not win you any favors. In fact, the next time you ask for one, you may find your favor account overdrawn. And of course, I've linked to the article. All right. Yes. Management magicians very rarely / almost never hear this phrase, because management magicians are totally focused on hiring the best talent. And the best talent, by definition, is talent that actually wants to be there. If you have a choice between somebody who doesn't really want to be there and they have just amazingly highly developed skills, and you've got somebody who has less developed skills but they really want to be there, well, it just sort of makes sense to go with the one that has less developed skills. I'll make this analogy. It's sort of, okay, in your personal life, right? So you're not work stuff, but your personal life, right? So your community of caring is something we talk about in many shows, and that's the people in our lives that are there because they care. And they pass the test that our happiness is their happiness, right? And the other opposite, right? So that when I'm unhappy, they're unhappy. Those are my friends, family, neighbors, spouses, somebody I'm dating, just whoever that's in my community of caring. And I also reciprocate. I'm happy if they're happy. I'm unhappy if they're unhappy. When you are looking at finding let's say you're going to go out and date someone seriously, so it'll be your uh, your steady dating person, right? Sometimes depending on where you are in the world, right? Maybe people use terms like boyfriend or girlfriend or whoever. Okay. If you're going to go out and date somebody, would you rather date somebody who was amazingly awesome, like just had won awards at their job, is just literally um, recognized as just an exceptionally successful, talented, awesome person, but they really don't care that much about you? you know, Maybe, if their schedule's free and your schedule's free and they're not doing anything else and nobody else more interesting comes along, maybe they'll spend time with you. Option one. Or option two, the person is not as at all, not anywhere near as, renowned for being just incredibly successful and, you know, award winning or a community leader. They're just nowhere near that, right? Their skills are they're competent in what they do in life, but they're nowhere near as elite and again, lauded. Yet they really, really, really are engaged in being with you. They have a high level of engagement and commitment and passion. They really care about you. They want to see you no matter what. They're thinking about you when you're not around. They're asking you, how are you? What happened today? And they mean it. There is nothing that brings them more joy than spending time with you. Now, who are you going to pick to be in your community of caring as a priority? The person who can, take it or leave it, time with you, whatever. If you reach out to them, maybe they'll get back to you. Maybe they won't, right? Do you want that person? Or do you want the person who really wants to be there, who really wants to be with you? Well, most of us would say, duh, this is not, really? Is this a question? I'm going to want the one that really wants to be there. In my real life, I don't want to be around people who don't really want to be with me, that I'm having to beg to spend time with me. Okay. As simple as that seems in your real life, although I know, because we've talked about this somewhat in some of our other programs that relate to life outside of work and our decisions, and how we spend our time, people do this all the time. People go out and find somebody and they claim that they're in their community of caring, but the reality is they really aren't. That person doesn't really care about them. The person, if it all kind of lined up for that person and it was convenient and they weren't doing anything else, yeah, maybe they'll spend a little time with you. But they don't really care about you, and they show that because they don't call you back or text you back. They, don't show up all the time, and they say they are going to, and they don't really pay attention when they're even in the same room with you. Are they listening? Are they paying attention? No. You can see that they're thinking about something else. People actually, sadly, sometimes will do this, and then they wonder why they're so sad and upset and in so much personal pain. Well, it's because you're around people who don't care about you. And then you're begging them to see the value in you. And anytime you get in that situation, you're in bad shape. It's the same thing. It's the same thing to a large extent at work. If the people don't want to work there, I don't care what you do, right? It's just like that thing outside of work. And people sometimes will think, well, yeah, but they're so awesome. They're so successful. If I just dress better, or I get, in shape better, or I say, I just learn more better jokes, or I'm just funnier, or, then they'll like me. And you and I know that's not true at all, right? And it's the same thing with a job. And people think, well, maybe if we just make the workplace, more convenient for them and we give them more incentives, then they'll care. No, look, if they don't care, they're not going to care more just because you try to kind of gussy it up a little bit. It doesn't work like that. If they do care, then they care already and they're invested and they're like, what's going on? What's happening? How can I help? It's like that in your real life and it's like that at work. So management magicians very rarely, better phrasing than my almost never earlier, but management magicians very rarely ever hear somebody say it's not part of my job, because they intentionally are screening out these types of people. They don't want those people to work there because they know that that's a total drain on the system. Because now I have somebody that I'm paying money to that I'm basically begging to care, even though I'm already paying them. And that's of course perverse, and it's counterproductive for everybody. It makes the team members and peers angry because they feel like, hey, why aren't they pitching in? Well, they're not pitching in because they don't care. And so the person who is pitching in starts to think, well, if they don't care and they're allowed to stay here, why am I doing all of this? Why do I care? And the really weird thing is when you care, I don't know how to turn that off. I really don't. If you're the kind of person that cares, I've not seen it successful to sort of transition over to like flip a switch and now you don't care. You're apathetic. You're not engaged. You're like, whatever. I don't care if it's late. I don't care if our customers ever get customer service. I don't care at all. It's really difficult for you to do that. I don't know how. And whoever can figure that out is going to, be wealthy beyond measure, just because every organization in the world is going to want to, retain their services at some level. But in the interim, the caring people care. The non-caring people, they don't care. Now, the really cool thing is these things are contextual. You can have somebody who totally didn't care at one place in one organization and put them in a different type of organization that they do care about, and they love it. Right? So maybe somebody was working in a bakery before and they didn't really care. But their real passion has always been motorcycles, and so they get hired in a motorcycle store and they care. They're early, they know everything about the motorcycles. They are super excited to talk to the customers about motorcycles because that's like a thing they already love. So that's the really neat thing. These things aren't universal. There are people who I'm sure, because I've shared in other programs when I was working through school as a young person, as a teenager, and then in my early 20s, there were jobs I worked just for money because I needed money, and that's not my calling. The food service industry actually is one that I did okay. I did better than some of my other jobs. But there's some other jobs that were not, I worked in retail, in like shopping malls. I was worse at that than I was working as, in food service. In food service, is a pretty good delivery driver, not so good waitress, and then as a retail person at the mall, it was not good. That is not my skill. I was not talented at that. And that's okay. And then other things that I love and I'm passionate about, the work I do now, teaching, speaking, writing, performing, researching. These are things that this is, my version of the guy who loves baking, or the girl who loves, speedboats. And if you're the girl that loves speedboats and you get to work in speedboat business, you're thrilled. That's what I'm doing. Like, that's why younger I was working my way through school, so I'd get some more skills, education, experience, so that I could move toward my fantasy job. These are my fantasy jobs. That's why I'm so engaged, right? I'm so excited because this is stuff I love. This stuff when I was a little kid, this is the kind of stuff I dreamed about. I love all of it. So it makes me so happy, right? I've worked for this for decades to get to the point to be able to make a living doing my stuff that I dream of and love. So but if you ask the person who was my supervisor or coworker when I was doing jobs that I wasn't as engaged, right? At the mall or some other job, they may say, I doubt any of them would remember, but if they did, they may say, hey, yeah, she was not awesome at all. Yeah. And they're telling the truth because that wasn't my thing. It wasn't my area of passion and engagement. So the really neat thing, what I'm trying to say is, just because somebody might be in a place where they are, I can't say never because I don't remember everything I've ever said in my whole life, but I don't remember saying to somebody, that's not part of my job. I do remember I probably wasn't very enthusiastic at some of the things I was doing and didn't necessarily show the greatest level of joy when requested to do extra work, related to my job, but still, because, it wasn't my area of my true love in life, I probably wasn't the most enthusiastic team member, and that's okay. If somebody's in a situation where they feel like, hey, they want to say that's not part of my job, that's a clue to them to continue on with that strategy to get into something else, because that's not the place for them, because they don't really care about it. And it's the same advice I would give somebody outside of work, right? When they're in some horrible situation where they think they're dating someone seriously who doesn't even really care about them. The advice would be, just because that person doesn't care about you doesn't mean anything. It just means that that's not the right person for you, and you're not the right person for them. Move on to somebody who it is. Somebody who really cares about you and you care about them. That's all you're trying to do. And when you have that meeting of the minds, then amazing things can happen. And that's what managers know. Managers know that I need somebody, and I do mean the word need, not want, but I mean need. And when we talk about management and we do hiring programs, and sometimes people say, hey, I need people. I'm desperate. I'm so busy. I got to hire whoever. I'm just going to get just whoever is, breathing is hired. When you do that, it almost always is a bad decision, because you're going to just have a pool of people who don't care at all. And it's amazing that somebody who doesn't care can be an impediment to any type of success. They may drive away business, worse than having, being understaffed. So the management magician realizes if somebody says it's not part, if they actually say it and do it, Do it means their behavior. Like they literally just refuse to help. Or they could say, well, that's not part of my job. If they say and they do that, then that means that they're not the right person at the right time at the right place. And you can't fix everything in their life, but you can help them understand that we're going to have to make some sort of transition moving forward. Right? And the easiest thing to do as a manager magicians always do this. First, no matter how awesome your hiring process is, there's still going to be a few people that slip through who might have thought it really was a great job for them. But then when they started, they realized this really isn't it. And that's why they're saying it's not part of my job. Management magicians will ask that person. You will schedule time to follow up with them, not at the moment when they're refusing to do some of the job, but you'll follow up with them later and talk to them and understand better what are their goals and dreams. What did they think this job would be versus what it is? And there may be another place in the organization for them. There may be another skill set for them. Or it may be that they need to move on somewhere else, but you need to ask and understand what happened. How did this happen where we have somebody who cares so little that you would actually refuse to help? And for those of us, and it's probably going to be almost all of us, who've been on the side of the customer, the client, or the constituent, like we go to, a government office because we need to get some form, and there are people that work there, but we ask for help, and they'll say, oh, that's not my job. I can't help you. And we get frustrated because we feel like, look, even if it's not your job specifically to help me with this specific form, you literally work here. Like you're behind the work area with a name tag on that says you work here. So even if you don't know how to specifically help me with this, can you tell? I know you know more than I do. You could tell me where to go, or you could, call somebody or direct me to a different place or something, right? Just to sort of say to me, tough, not me. And this leave me with no help is really upsetting, right? And I know it's happened, you go to a store to buy something, clothes or whatever, and you see somebody that works there because they have like an outfit on that shows that they work there. And you say to them, excuse me, I needed some help over here with this. And they'll say, oh, this isn't my area. It's not my job. And then they just leave. And you feel like, well, couldn't you call somebody or text them or something and say, well, hey, this isn't my area, but let me get you somebody who can help you, or let me get my manager to come find out who can help you. Just something, just to leave me there. It makes us mad. And that's why I said when you have somebody that cares about the organization, they understand the big picture, the mad customer or client isn't something to be ignored. Because that's going to negatively impact your organization. And that's going to negatively impact the paycheck of whoever works at the organization at some point, pretty dramatically. So when you're on the recipient side of this and you're the manager or magician, you know that you don't get mad at yourself that somebody, kind of got through the process and, because you do everything you can not to let these people on board. But a few will always get through. Just the nature of life. Then all you want to do is have an investigation so you can understand what is it that they thought would happen, or maybe something changed in their life. Like maybe initially they were engaged, but now something happened. Maybe their son-in-law, was transferred, and now they have to help out with their grandchild, and so because of that, the work schedule isn't going to fit them, and that's why they're not willing to be able to do any more to contribute. So ask them. You don't know. Don't just, so the article I read talked about people are lazy and all this. Maybe sometimes they are, but you don't know exactly what's going on unless you ask, and then potentially you can help them come together with solutions, right? To hopefully get a win-win. And if not, then the win-win will be that they'll move on to somewhere else that does fit them, and then you'll get somebody else here that does care. And that'll work. On the other side of it, I've got a quote. The other side is, so that was the recipient. The other side is you're the sender, right? So there's a quote from the BBC, right? And so here's this quote. This again on the show notes on CourtneyAnderson.com on our show page for this site. So the title of the article on the BBC is, "That's Not My Job." How do you decide whether something is okay? So the article talks about basically you're doing something work related, and yet you get a request from somebody that's not work related. So it's your boss asking to help them pick up something for their grandmother's birthday, and their grandmother does not work here, and this is not at all related to your business. It is your coworker asking if you'll help with their kids' school project. No, it is, anybody asking something that is not related to the job, because then it actually literally isn't part of the job, right? Like, this is a bank. Why are you asking me to help with your grandmother's birthday? What? Or, this is a medical facility. What are you asking me for your grandkids' school project? What? So it literally isn't part of the job, but let's clarify a couple things. First of all, management magicians never make these types of requests. Management magician is a management magician because they are so adept at understanding the correct context and environment. And so when we're at work, we do work stuff. When we're not at work, then we do non-work stuff. But we don't mix these. We're not at work doing non-work stuff and then bringing other people in to do non-work stuff, because that deprives them of the opportunity to do work stuff, and it also means I'm cheating the company or the government agency that employs me because I'm not even doing my work. I'm using their time and resources to go do personal stuff. And has this happened in our human existence? Yes. In fact, it happens quite frequently. I know in the past when I was working jobs, putting myself through school, I saw this happen. I saw supervisors who were supposed to be working and they were, socializing. And when the internet started to, and I'll go way back before even the internet, the way that we know it now, the ubiquitous everywhere type internet that everybody has. Before the internet, I worked in a place and I watched a person sit and play. It was computer games. It was like computer solitaire. They were like card games on the computer. They weren't internet based because before internet existed like it does now. So this is like the 90s. And so with even before the internet, people had stuff that they could do that would be non-related to work. So that was a person who sat on a computer and just did cards on the computer. I've seen people do literally physical game cards, so they don't even need a computer, right? I've seen people just gossip. People, do all kind of stuff, right? And none of it's related to work. So when somebody's not doing work stuff, then obviously we have a whole bunch of problems. But the main core issue is then we definitely have no management magicianship going on, because we have elite people that are management magicians. When somebody's at work, they just follow the culture. That's why workplace and organizational culture is such a big area of study and corporate education and training programs. If I go get a job and during the hiring and orientation they tell me, it's really important that you focus on your task, and we've got to get focused on our goals, and you think, okay, and then you go there actually to start working and everybody else is not doing work, then what you're going to do is not do work, because you can't go in there and do work when nobody else is doing work. And I've shared an anecdote. I worked on an assembly line in a manufacturing facility. This is again years ago when I'm working my way through school, and I worked 12-hour shifts, just literally sitting in one spot on an assembly line. You got breaks and bathroom and lunch and stuff, but basically on an assembly line, it's what you think. Like I sat in one place and I did one manual task. I put one item on another piece of item. I put one component on a piece of product that was moving by on an assembly line. That was literally my job. And what happened initially when I first started is I was putting my component on the piece, on the product really quickly, because I was thinking, well, if I do this quickly, then the time will go by faster, and it won't be as boring sitting here for my 12-hour shift. And the people that were in the assembly line next to me got angry with me. Some of them said, mean words to me. And they were saying, I was working too hard, because the faster I worked, then the more stuff would back up for them. And they'd either need to work faster or it'd make them look like they weren't doing their jobs, which technically I would argue they weren't really totally doing their jobs, because I noticed, because I was sitting right there next to them and it was a long shift. And they were just like hanging out and socializing and stuff. What did they do over the weekend? What are they going to do next weekend? What kind of television show they were watching? They were just talking and hanging out and having fun. And then every once in a while, they would do the slowest level of assembly line production they could, and that was a win-win, I think, for them. Like maximize fun time, minimal amount of actual task, win-win, right? What I was doing by working really quick was making stuff back up, and it was ruining the whole system. So I was going to have to slow down. They didn't really care if I socialized with them, because I was new and they didn't know me, and at that point they didn't even like me. But I was not going to be able to ruin everything with my stupid thing about trying to work too hard. And that's what I'm saying. It's their culture. So management magicians have a culture where people come to work, feel like, yeah, we're going to get it done. We're making it happen. Yay. I matter. The organization matters. Yay. And then they also are respected for boundaries. So you're not, unless you have a very rare job, and even if you have a life-saving job, like people who work in emergency services, like medical providers, law enforcement, ambulance workers, even then they have set shifts. so that they can, so that if they're on call or they're on that shift, then yeah, during that time period, of course, they're, it's unpredictable. They don't know what's going to happen, but they're ready. That's why they're at work. But when they're not working, then you're not asking them for stuff. And you never ask people for things that are not related to the job, because the moment you do that, it teaches them that you don't care about the job. And if you don't care, why should they? Now, the problem, though, is that most people who do care, like I said earlier, I don't know the answer of how to turn off the switch. So what tends to happen is the person who cares still cares, but then they sort of insider, there's conflict because nobody else cares. And if their boss is the one that doesn't care, it ruins it for them, because they have all this compulsion to care. And then the boss is like, don't care about the job. I want you to go run an errand for my grandmother or pick up my kid at daycare. And then the person who cared about the work they're completely overwhelmed because it's such conflict. Like their drive and compulsion is to do the work, but now they can't do the work because you're telling them to go do stuff for your kid or your grandmother or whatever, and that takes away their ability to do the work. And it's also completely, and I'm just going to use this word, wrong. Now, some people will argue it's unethical and have a framework to show you why. In many parts of the world, it's illegal to do that, because technically when they're being paid by the organization, then they're supposed to do work stuff. If you take them while they're being paid for the organization to go do stuff that's not related to the job, then you're stealing the resources. But I'm just going to use the word wrong, because even in a place where that's what people do, those abuses of power are sort of commonplace, it's still wrong. So the BBC article talks a lot about that part of this, where they even have a section later in the article that, of course, you can go to through the link on our page. In some parts of the world, some cultures, whether like small businesses, sometimes like family-run, really small organizations may have more of this because they're small business, and it's two brothers that run the business, and so they may feel like, oh, okay, and they, we have an employee, but we're brothers, and it's only really us, and it's a small business. Sure, we're going to do something for our kid. That can happen, but it's a universal. It's not a universal stereotype that a small business or a family-run business automatically is poorly managed. It's just not, and it's a stereotype, and again, it's. And it's inaccurate, but it does happen. But you see the big organizations and small organizations. So it's dishonest to make the argument that, oh, just because it's small or family run, and that's why they do that. No, it isn't. I've worked with personally in fantastic family run organizations that were run exceptionally well with very elite level management magicians and none of this stuff. And I've also worked with organizations that are nowhere near a small business where there's a ton of it, and it's just abuse of the system. It's managers who don't care. It's coworkers who don't care. There was a Hollywood movie, right, about a book where somebody, I think it was from memory, it was in fashion, right? So there was a movie about this a few years ago where the boss did all this, right? Go to my home and do things for my children, right? Now it was a fashion business, so the person who worked there had, go into their boss's house to do stuff for their family and their kids was not at all related to the job. And so they made a movie about it, and it was, sort of showing how this is something that is not, unfortunately, that rare. It does happen, and even though the movie was for entertainment, in real life, it's not funny at all. And I'm just going to use the word wrong. Now, is it possible for somebody to be able to be permitted to keep being disrespectful and or wasting organization resources? Yeah, it happens all the time. If you have poor senior executive leadership who let other people below their level abuse their team members and steal resources and disrespect people, then that happens all the time, unfortunately, all over the world. I can't do anything but be candid. And so in that type of an environment, you'll see all types of abuse and inefficiency and awful things that happen. And of course, you have horrible engagement, poor morale, high turnover, all these types of problems, right? So the BBC article was talking about you're being asked to do something that really isn't part of your job. And then the BBC article says, how do you decide whether something is okay? And it goes on to say, context is everything. And there's a management consultant that says, it depends on your relationship and the pattern of behavior so far. First, do you want to do it? Second, does it appear your boss has no other choice than to ask you? Third, what are the probable consequences for you if you don't? And so it's I think a good resource to help you kind of think through, okay, obviously this is wrong. Yet in the moment, what'll happen to me if I say no to my especially if it's a boss, who's asking me to do something that really isn't part of my job. But what tends to happen is the person, even if they'll do it, they're going to be planning on the inside for an escape, because nobody wants to be in that situation. If you need a dog walker or a babysitter or, a grandparent gift buyer, then you need to go retain that. If you need a personal assistant in your private life to go take care of personal assistant issues, you need to go retain that and pay for it out of your resources allocated appropriately for your own personal life budget. But you don't need to take resources from an organization that's an employment organization for another work-related entity and then try to convert that labor into your free labor for these other issues. Those are different businesses. And I've said in other programs, I've had personal assistants and people that help me with all different types of my life. I pay for that out of my own pocket. And if you need an assistant, an executive assistant or a personal assistant at your business, then they need to take care of business stuff. And in summation, when you have this situation, that's not part of my job, you have a problem. You either have a problem where it really is part of somebody's job, which we talked about in the first part, right? And you're the recipient of this, where it really is part of their job, but they're not engaged, and that's not the right place for them long term, okay? The second problem is, when they say that's not part of their job, that's not part of my job. It really isn't. It is not part of the job. It is about your, dog or your cat sitter or, running to get your dry cleaning or whatever. That really is not part of your job. That's not part of their job. And the problem then isn't them, it's you. And you being whoever it is that's asking and requesting somebody, to do something that's not part of your job. It's destroying your organization. And that may sound like hyperbole. Oh, it doesn't destroy it. I know people do this all the time. Yeah, you do, right? The reason you know about it is because people spread information about that horrible boss. They're not, and I was mentioning the movie earlier. The movie I was referring to was The Devil Wears Prada. But there's other movies like this, right? I think what is it? I want to say it was Swimming with the Sharks. Another movie about a Hollywood producer, I believe, or executive who's a horrible boss. Again, these are entertainment, fictionalized. But the point is that the narrative is out there on a global scale because it does exist. And again, I'm going to make the argument it's wrong. If it's not part of their job, then why is anybody asking them to do it? Now, if it is part of their job, then of course, then they need to understand that we're all in the same boat, sharing the same vision for our customers, clients, and constituents, and that's an issue that they're not in the right place. But if you're asking somebody to do something that's not part of their job, then you're in the wrong. Because what on earth are you talking about? Something that's not part of their job. This is the job. So let's do work stuff at work. And the other stuff that you need help with or you're stressed out about, then you're going to either have to, budget better or get another job so you can get more money to hire somebody to go help you with your kids and your dry cleaning and your dog and your all this other stuff. But don't do things that are wrong. Because yes, at some level, whether you are aware of it or not, it does destroy individuals and organizations. It's not worth it. It's so easy to do this, to set it up and just do work stuff at work, treat people with respect, and there we go. It's a win-win. So this again was a really interesting show. I hope that you thought through some of the issues and that you thought, okay, well, I don't want to be ever the one that's the recipient of this. Try to hire people who care. If I do hear somebody says it's not part of their job and something's going on, I want to find the time to really do an assessment with them and understand why they feel that way, what's going on in their life where that was their reaction. Maybe there's a solution we can come up with, maybe a part-time schedule, alternative department or something. And or the person might need to eventually move on to a different place where they will feel like it's something that they want to contribute to. And if you're somebody who's in a situation where you're being requested to do stuff that's really isn't part of the job at all in any way, it's just wrong, someone's just trying to exploit you, then obviously if you don't have the power to change that organization, you're going to have to move on and do your best, right? Because the hiring thing works both ways. Assess, is this a place where I'll be respected and treated as a professional, or is this a place where I'll be subject to things that are wrong and where people will ask me to be taken advantage of? But there's not any scenario where this concept, that's not part of my job, is a good sign. It is always a bad sign, right? And that means then that we've got to take action. And the wonderful thing also means, though, that it gives us an opportunity, right, to change location, change work, change situations so that our attitude is different, so that we get to a place where, yeah, it's a win-win. And we're doing stuff at work, about work, ready to pitch in. So thank you again. As always, I do ask you to stop by CourtneyAnderson.com, share any show ideas. If you find our show on a distribution partner, Twitter, Libsyn, iHeartRadio, any of our partners around the world, go ahead and leave ratings and reviews, because that's how we continue to grow, and we are growing. Oh my goodness, it's so exciting. All over the world. And reach out to me. Let me know show concepts, ideas, and we'll be integrating more content to make it easier for people to follow up on a certain topic and potentially request different workshops or seminars or programs based on different topics within the website. And I have joined Twitter, so I'm at Zealous Business, and I am so happy that you were here today, because it is part of my job, and I am always grateful for the opportunity to work with you and work towards surpassing your goals. Thank you.